The massive viewing screen in the Galactic Council chamber showed a small dot moving across space. Admiral Krell squinted his 4 eyes, wondering if there was something wrong with the display. He tapped his clawed finger against the control panel, but the image remained the same. "This can't be right," he muttered, his scales shifting from blue to green with confusion. "Are you telling me that's their largest military vessel?" The technical officer, a tall insectoid named Rax, clicked his mandibles together in confirmation. "Yes, Admiral. The human ship measures just under 1 kilometer in length." Laughter erupted across the chamber. The gathered representatives of the Galactic Council, each from civilizations that had mastered space travel centuries or millennia ago, couldn't believe what they were seeing. How do they even fit a proper engine in something that small? Someone called out from the back. Admiral Krell raised his hand for silence. Despite the amusing situation, protocol had to be followed. "Continue with your report, Officer Rax." "The species calls themselves humans. They achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 50 Earth years ago. Their home system contains 8 planets, of which they inhabit 1. They have small colonies on 2 others." Rax paused, adjusting his translator. "Their total fleet numbers less than 50 combat-ready vessels." More laughter filled the chamber. Even Admiral Krell couldn't hold back a smile, his scales now shifting to a pleasant shade of yellow amusement. "And they think they're ready for contact with the Galactic Council?" A representative from the Morgan Federation asked, their crystalline bodies sparkling with mirth. "They've already detected our observation posts," Rax explained. "Protocol requires we initiate diplomatic contact before they stumble upon something more sensitive." Admiral Krell nodded. As amusing as these humans seemed, rules were rules. "Very well. Prepare a diplomatic vessel. Something small. We wouldn't want to frighten them with a proper ship." This earned another round of chuckles from the chamber. 3 days later, the human diplomatic team arrived at the neutral meeting station. Ambassador James Miller led the group, his back straight and his expression carefully neutral. He was older than most active diplomats, with gray hair and lined features that spoke of decades of experience. The station's docking officer stared in disbelief as the human ship approached. It looked like a toy next to the other vessels. Yet, despite its size, it moved with remarkable precision, docking smoothly on the first attempt. Admiral Krell waited in the main conference room, along with representatives from 12 major council species. They had deliberately chosen larger chairs to emphasize their technological superiority. The Admiral himself sat on a raised platform, his scales now a dignified shade of deep blue. The doors slid open, and Ambassador Miller walked in with his team. If they were intimidated by the larger aliens or their obvious show of superiority, they didn't show it. "Welcome to Galactic Council Station T9, Admiral Krell announced, his translator converting his subsonic speech into standard human English. "We trust your journey was comfortable in your compact vessel." Miller smiled, catching the slight but choosing to ignore it. "Thank you, Admiral. The journey was quite pleasant. Our ships may be smaller than what you're used to, but they serve our needs perfectly." Of course," the Admiral replied condescendingly. "We all start somewhere. I'm sure that in a few centuries, you'll develop proper spacefaring capabilities." The human ambassador's smile didn't waver. "We look forward to learning from the Council's experience, though I should mention that we're quite satisfied with our current ship designs. They're exactly the size we want them to be." Something in Miller's tone made Admiral Krell's scales ripple slightly. There was a confidence there that seemed out of place. But he brushed the thought aside. What could these primitives possibly know that the combined wisdom of the Galactic Council didn't? "Let us proceed with the formal introduction protocols," Krell announced. "Though given your limited fleet size, we'll keep the military cooperation sections brief." As the meeting continued, none of the council members noticed the small glint of amusement in Ambassador Miller's eyes. They were too busy feeling superior to wonder why the humans seemed so unconcerned about their technological disadvantage. They would learn soon enough. 2 weeks after the first diplomatic meeting, alarms blared across Earth's defense network. A massive fleet had just jumped into the outer solar system, their ships casting shadows larger than Earth's moon. In the United Earth Defense Force headquarters beneath Mount Cheyenne, Admiral Reynolds stared at the tactical display. The incoming vessels were enormous, each one stretching 20 kilometers from bow to stern. Their dark hulls bristled with weapon ports, and their engines left trails of exotic particles visible even to civilian telescopes. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. They're identifying themselves as the Drachnid Empire." Reynolds straightened his uniform. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and an insect. Its armored carapace gleamed under harsh lighting, and multiple compound eyes reflected the camera's glare. "People of Earth," the creature spoke, its translator giving it a deep, rumbling voice. "I am High Commander Vex of the Drachnid Empire. Your species has been judged too weak to maintain independence in this sector." Reynolds kept his face neutral, even as his hands clenched into fists behind his back. "This is Admiral Thomas Reynolds of the United Earth Defense Force. We are a sovereign species under preliminary protection of the Galactic Council." A sound like grinding stones emerged from Vex's throat, apparently a laugh. "The Council? They consider you primitives. We've seen their reports. Your largest ship is smaller than our crew quarters." The screen split, showing a tactical comparison. A Drachnid dreadnought appeared next to Earth's largest vessel, making it look like a rowboat next to an aircraft carrier. "We are not intimidated by size," Reynolds replied calmly. "Then you are fools." Vex's mandibles clicked in apparent amusement. "We have 200 warships in this fleet alone. You have, what? 50 tiny vessels. We could crush them without noticing." Behind Reynolds, his crew worked silently at their stations. To any observer, they seemed worried, but those who looked closely might have noticed small smiles on their faces. "I am authorized to offer you terms," Vex continued. "Surrender within 30 Earth days. Submit to Drachnid rule. In return, we will allow your species to live as servants rather than being exterminated." Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. "And if we refuse?" The tactical display updated, showing the Drachnid fleet spreading out across the solar system. Their massive ships moved with surprising grace for their size, taking up strategic positions near Earth's major colonies on Mars and Venus. "Then we will demonstrate why the Drachnid Empire has conquered 12 sectors in the past century alone." Vex's compound eyes seemed to glitter. "Your ships are toys. Your weapons are primitive. You have no chance." "We'll need time to discuss your generous offer," Reynolds replied diplomatically. "You have 30 days. Use them wisely." The screen went dark. In the following hours, news of the ultimatum spread across Earth and its colonies. The public broadcasts showed the size difference between the fleets, and many civilians began to panic. Emergency shelters filled up, and some called for immediate surrender. But in secure facilities across the planet, military personnel remained strangely calm. In his office, Reynolds received a priority call from Ambassador Miller, who had just returned from the Council station. "Did they take the bait?" Miller asked without preamble. Reynolds nodded. "Completely. They're so focused on the size of our ships that they haven't bothered with detailed scans, just like you predicted they would." "The Council's prejudices worked in our favor," Miller agreed. "They were so busy laughing at our tiny fleet that their reports completely missed the interesting parts." "Should we tell the Drachnids what happened to the last group that thought size alone determined military strength?" Reynolds asked, allowing himself a grin. "No," Miller replied, matching his expression. "I think this is one of those lessons that needs to be learned firsthand. Initiate Operation Mosquito." "With pleasure," Reynolds said, reaching for the secure command console. "They want to see what our little ships can do. Let's show them." As the call ended, Reynolds looked out his window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the massive Drachnid fleet waited, confident in their superiority. They had no idea what was coming. 30 days would be more than enough time to prepare their surprise. Deep within the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Earth's tiny fleet gathered. From a distance, the 50 ships looked almost fragile compared to the massive Drachnid warships patrolling the solar system. But inside these vessels, a different story was unfolding. Admiral Reynolds stood in the hangar bay of his flagship, the EDF Hornet. Around him, rows upon rows of sleek, dark objects filled the massive space. Each one was barely larger than an old Earth fighter jet, but these weren't ordinary aircraft. Beautiful, aren't they? Chief Engineer Marcus stepped up beside him, looking proudly at the machines. Each drone carries enough firepower to punch through standard alien armor, and their AI can make decisions faster than any living pilot. Reynolds nodded, watching as maintenance crews performed final checks. How many can each ship carry? This class, about 5,000 combat drones, plus another 1,000 repair units. Marcus grinned. The Drachnids think these hangars are our engine rooms. Their scans can't penetrate our hull shielding, so they assume all this space is taken up by primitive propulsion systems. The Admiral walked along the rows, remembering his military history lessons. You know, back in World War II, the Japanese built the biggest battleships ever seen. The Yamato was considered invincible. But what changed the course of the war? Aircraft carriers, Marcus replied. Smaller ships that carried the real threat, planes that could attack from all directions. Exactly. Reynolds stopped at a viewing window, looking out at the stars. The Drachnids think like those old battleship admirals. Bigger is better. More guns equals more power. They never stopped to ask why we kept our ships small. In another part of the ship, technicians were running final checks on the drone control systems. The operations center looked like a mix between a server room and a beehive, with hexagonal processing units stacked from floor to ceiling. Each drone has its own AI, the lead programmer explained to a group of officers. But they work together like a swarm of insects. If one drone finds a weakness, it shares that information with the entire network instantly. On the main screen, a simulation showed thousands of dots swarming around a larger vessel. The drones moved in perfect coordination, attacking from multiple angles, retreating when faced with strong resistance, and exploiting any weakness they found. The best part, the programmer smiled. They're practically invisible to standard scanners, too small to register as ships, too fast to track easily, and too numerous to stop. Back in his command center, Reynolds reviewed the final preparations for Operation Mosquito. The name had come from Earth's history, the tiny insect that could drive even the largest animals to madness. Sir, his tactical officer reported, all ships report their drone bays are ready. We can launch the entire swarm within 30 seconds of your command. Reynolds checked the status of each vessel in his fleet. Every ship carried thousands of drones, waited silently in their hangars. The Drachnids had mocked their fleet for being small, never realizing that each tiny human vessel was actually a carrier for an army of deadly machines. Send word to all commanders, Reynolds ordered. Review the historical footage I provided. I want everyone to understand why this will work. On screens throughout the fleet, footage began playing. Small PT boats harassing larger vessels in World War II, aircraft carriers launching strikes against battleships, and modern drone swarms performing precision attacks. The Drachnids think war is about size, Reynolds told his crew. We're going to teach them that it's about adaptation, about using your enemy's assumptions against them. They see 50 small ships and think we're weak. They don't realize they're looking at a fleet that can deploy 250,000 attack drones. He turned to his command staff, his expression serious but confident. In 25 days, they expect us to surrender. Instead, we're going to show them why humanity has survived every challenge we've ever faced. Not because we're bigger or stronger, but because we're smarter. In the hangars below, the drones waited silently. Soon, They would teach the galaxy why you should never judge Earth's military by the size of its ships. The 30th day dawned with the Drachnid fleet moving into attack position. Their massive ships blocked out the stars, forming a wall of metal 20 kilometers high. Energy readings from their weapons could be detected even on Earth's surface, causing aurora-like lights in the sky. In orbit above Mars, 3 Galactic Council observation vessels watched. Admiral Krell stood on his command deck, expecting to document Earth's surrender. Instead, his sensors detected movement from the asteroid belt. "What are they doing?" he muttered, his scales shifting to a confused yellow-green. "Surely they don't mean to fight." Earth's 50 ships moved in perfect formation, looking like toys compared to the Drachnid warships. High Commander Vex's laughter boomed across all communication channels. "Look at them," he broadcast. "Their entire fleet could fit in one of our hangars. This will be the shortest battle in Imperial history." The human ships continued their advance, maintaining their tight formation. Admiral Reynolds sat calmly in his command chair aboard the EDF Hornet, watching the tactical display. "All ships report ready, sir," his executive officer announced. "Drone bays standing by." Reynolds nodded. "Send one last message to the Drachnid fleet." The communications officer opened a channel. "This is Admiral Reynolds of the United Earth Defense Force. This is your final chance to withdraw from Earth space." The response was immediate. Vex's image appeared on the main screen, his compound eyes gleaming with amusement. "You still try to act brave? Look at our ships. Each one could crush your entire fleet." "Size isn't everything," Reynolds replied calmly. "But since you mention it," he pressed a button on his chair. "Let me show you something interesting." At first, nothing seemed to happen. The human ships maintained their position, still looking small and vulnerable. Then, panel by panel, their hulls began to open. "What's this?" Vex leaned forward. "Some kind of surrender display." Reynolds smiled. "Not exactly. All ships. Release the swarms." What happened next would be talked about in the Galactic Council for centuries. From each human vessel, thousands of small objects poured out like angry bees from a disturbed hive. The space between the fleets filled with dots, too many to count. On the Drachnid command ship, alarms began blaring. "Sir," a panicked officer called out. "Detecting multiple. No, thousands, millions of small objects approaching. Impossible." Vex zoomed in on the scene. His compound eyes widened as he saw the truth. Each human ship had released what looked like a cloud of metal insects. The drones moved with impossible precision, forming complex patterns as they approached. "What kind of trickery is this?" he demanded. Reynolds' voice came across all channels, calm and clear. "You judged us by the size of our ships. That was your first mistake. Your second was assuming we think about war the same way you do." The swarms accelerated, breaking into smaller groups. Each group targeted a different Drachnid vessel, approaching from multiple angles. "Fire," Vex ordered. "Destroy those toys." The massive Drachnid ships opened fire, their huge weapons designed to destroy vessels kilometers long. But trying to hit the drones was like trying to shoot mosquitoes with a cannon. The small machines easily dodged the energy beams and projectiles. On the Council observation ships, Admiral Krell watched in fascination. His scales had turned pure white, a sign of shock in his species. "Clever," he whispered. "All this time, we thought their ships were small because they were primitive. But they're not warships at all. They're carriers." The space around the Drachnid fleet filled with swirling clouds of drones, like schools of fish surrounding a group of whales. The battle was about to begin, and suddenly, the size of humanity's ships didn't seem like a disadvantage at all. Reynolds watched the tactical display, his expression serious. "All drone squadrons, begin attack pattern Delta. Show them why you should never underestimate humanity." The swarms moved in for the kill. The first wave of drones struck the Drachnid fleet like a meteor shower. Each tiny machine targeted specific weak points, sensor arrays, weapon ports, engine exhausts, and communication antennas. The massive alien ships tried to defend themselves, but their weapons were designed to fight capital ships, not swarms of targets smaller than shuttlecraft. Impossible. High Commander Vex slammed his armored fist on his command console. How are they avoiding our targeting systems? His weapons officer's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, the drones are too small. Our tracking computers are designed for ships at least a kilometer in length. These things are barely bigger than escape pods. On the bridge of the EDF Hornet, Admiral Reynolds watched the battle unfold. The tactical display showed thousands of green dots swarming around the much larger red shapes of Drachnid vessels. Each drone operated independently yet coordinated perfectly with its companions, like a school of piranhas attacking much larger prey. First Blood, his tactical officer reported as one of the Drachnid screening ships lost power. The drones had targeted its engine cooling systems, forcing an emergency shutdown. No explosion, sir, just as planned. Reynolds nodded. They didn't need to destroy the Drachnid ships, just disable them. Launch second wave. Target pattern Bravo. Another wave of drones poured from the human ships. The Drachnids had thought the first wave was the entire attack force. They were wrong. Each human vessel contained multiple waves of drones, each programmed for different tactical approaches. On the Drachnid flagship, panic was setting in. Sir, we've lost contact with Squadrons 3 and 4. An officer reported. The drones have destroyed their communication arrays. Then use the backup systems, Vex roared. We can't. These things are everywhere. They're cutting through our hull like insects eating a crop. Reynolds' voice came through on their emergency channel. An interesting fact about Earth history. Sometimes the smallest enemies are the most dangerous. You can't fight a swarm with a sledgehammer. The Drachnid point defense systems fired frantically, occasionally destroying a drone. But for each one they shot down, 10 more took its place. The swarm was endless, relentless, and impossible to stop. From his observation post, Admiral Krell watched in fascination as his scales shifted between white shock and blue admiration. Remarkable, he muttered. They turned their supposed weakness into their greatest strength. The drones worked with surgical precision. Some cut power lines. Others disabled weapons. Many simply attached themselves to sensor arrays and broadcasted false data, leaving the mighty Drachnid ships blind and confused. Sir, Reynolds' executive officer called out. The enemy flagship is launching fighters. Finally, the Drachnids had realized they needed smaller ships to combat the drone swarms. But even this desperate measure came too late. The fighters, while faster than their capital ships, were still too large and too few to effectively combat the clouds of drones. Observe and adapt, Reynolds transmitted to all commands. Show them why humans have survived every challenge we've ever faced. The drones immediately altered their tactics. They stopped attacking the capital ships and focused on the fighters, demonstrating attack patterns that no living pilot could match. The AI systems calculated and executed maneuvers that would kill any human or Drachnid pilot, turning space into a deadly dance of light and metal. Within minutes, the Drachnid fighters were retreating, their weapons useless against enemies that could outmaneuver them at every turn. The mighty empire that had conquered 12 sectors with its massive ships was being defeated by machines smaller than their cafeteria tables. All ships, prepare final wave, Reynolds ordered. Let's end this before anyone gets desperate enough to try something stupid. The human fleet, still maintaining its perfect formation, launched its final wave of drones. To the Drachnids, it looked like a metal tide rushing toward them, ready to sweep away their last defenses. The battle was nearly over, and size had meant nothing at all. The Galactic Council observation ships watched in stunned silence as the battle reached its climax. Admiral Krell had never seen anything like it in his 300 years of military service. The mighty Drachnid fleet, terror of 12 sectors, was being systematically taken apart by machines smaller than escape pods. "Recording everything?" he asked his science officer. "Yes, Admiral, though I doubt anyone would believe it without proof." On the main display, another Drachnid warship went dark as drones severed its power systems. The massive vessel drifted helplessly, its weapons silent, its engines cold. It wasn't destroyed, just completely disabled. "Send to Council High Command," Krell dictated. "Message begins. Urgent revision of human military classification required. Current assessment drastically underestimated their capabilities." Aboard the Drachnid flagship, High Commander Vex watched his mighty fleet crumble. Half his ships had lost power. Another quarter had no weapons or sensors. The rest were so swarmed with drones they could barely move. "Status report," he demanded. His tactical officer's mandibles quivered. "Sir, we've lost contact with 70% of the fleet. Our remaining ships report critical system failures. We can't even send self-destruct signals. The drones have isolated all our command circuits." "Impossible." Vex slammed his armored fist down again. "They're just tiny machines. We are the Drachnid Empire. We do not lose to mosquitoes." Admiral Reynolds' voice came through on their emergency channel. "Another Earth history lesson for you. Some of our deadliest enemies have been the smallest. Bacteria, viruses, insects. We learned long ago not to judge threats by their size." As if to emphasize his point, warning lights flashed across the Drachnid flagship's bridge. The drones had reached their reactor shielding. "Sir," an engineer called out in panic, "they're not just disabling systems, they're taking control. These machines, they're rewriting our computer codes faster than our security can adapt." Reynolds' voice remained calm. "Those tiny drones carry more computing power than your entire ship. Did you really think we'd stayed small because we couldn't build bigger ships? We chose to be small. We chose to be smart." On the EDF Hornets bridge, Reynolds watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The drone swarms had executed their mission perfectly, following plans developed through years of secret preparation. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from 35 Drachnid vessels. The rest are either disabled or trying to retreat." "Trying?" Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir. The drones have disabled their engines. They're not going anywhere." In the observation ships, Admiral Krell added to his report, "Humans demonstrate unprecedented tactical innovation. Their small ships are actually carrier vessels for advanced drone swarms. Each human vessel effectively deploys more combat units than an entire Drachnid battle group." He watched as the drones herded the remaining active Drachnid ships into a controlled formation. The mighty warships, each one larger than a small city, were being corralled like cattle by machines they had dismissed as toys just hours ago. "Commander Vex," Reynolds broadcast on all channels, "your fleet is disabled. Your ships are under our control. Do you wish to surrender, or should we demonstrate more of our primitive technology?" The silence stretched for several long moments. Finally, Vex's voice came through, subdued and shocked. We surrender. The Drachnid Empire surrenders to Earth." Reynolds nodded to his crew. "Stand down attack swarms. Maintain control of their systems. Begin recovery operations." As the human fleet moved to secure their victory, Admiral Krell made one final addition to his report. Recommendation: immediate review of all human technology. Previous assessments based on size are clearly meaningless. These people don't think like the rest of us, and that makes them more dangerous than anyone realized. The drones began guiding the captured Drachnid ships toward Earth orbit. The battle was over, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. 1 month after the Battle of Earth, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The once mocking representatives now sat in respectful silence as Ambassador James Miller took the podium. Behind him, a hologram showed the captured Drachnid fleet in Earth orbit, their massive ships now guarded by the tiny human vessels. "The terms of surrender are simple. Miller announced. The Drachnid Empire will withdraw from all conquered territories. They will pay compensation to the species they displaced. And most importantly, they will acknowledge Earth's sovereignty and military authority in this sector. High Commander Vex, now a prisoner of war, stood with his head bowed. His once gleaming armor was dull, and his compound eyes no longer showed any trace of arrogance. "We accept these terms," he said, his translator making his voice sound tired. "The Empire acknowledges humanity's superiority." Admiral Krell, watching from his seat on the council, noticed how Vex stumbled over that last word. His scales shifted to a thoughtful blue as he remembered his own dismissive attitude just months ago. After the ceremony, Krell found Miller in one of the station's observation lounges. The human ambassador was watching Earth's ships patrol around the captured Drachnid fleet. "I must ask," Krell said, his scales showing genuine curiosity. "You could have told us about the drones from the beginning. Why let us believe you were primitive?" Miller smiled. "Would you have believed us, or would you have just found new reasons to look down on our technology?" "A fair point." Krell's scales rippled with embarrassment. "We were all so focused on size, on matching our own standards of power. We never considered there might be other ways to fight." "That's always been humanity's strength," Miller replied. "We adapt. We look for clever solutions. When we couldn't match our enemies in size or strength, we found other advantages." In the Council's military archives, a new section was being created. Officers from 100 species came to study footage of the battle, analyzing how Earth's drone swarms had systematically dismantled ships 20 times their size. Admiral Reynolds had been invited to give a lecture series on human military tactics. The first session was packed with alien military leaders eager to understand how they had been so wrong about Earth's capabilities. The mistake, Reynolds explained to the gathered officers, was thinking that small meant weak. That bigger automatically meant better. We didn't build huge ships because we didn't need to. Why make one giant target when you can have 1,000 smaller ones? In the weeks that followed, Earth's influence grew rapidly. Species that had once looked down on the primitive humans now sought trade agreements and military alliances. The Drachnid empires conquered territories, freed from occupation, sent diplomatic missions to Earth. But perhaps the most significant change happened in the Council's classification system. The old method of rating civilizations by the size of their ships was abandoned. In its place came a new system that evaluated actual technological capabilities, regardless of scale. 6 months after the battle, Admiral Krell sat in his office, reviewing human military history. The Battle of Midway, where smaller carriers defeated larger battleships. The defeat of Spanish Armada by more maneuverable English ships. Guerrilla warfare techniques that let smaller forces defeat larger armies. "We thought we were so advanced," he muttered to himself. "But they've been practicing these tactics for centuries. We just didn't bother to look." His computer chimed with a new report. Earth was beginning to share some of its drone technology with trusted allies. The report included images of new hybrid ship designs that combined alien size with human innovation. Krell smiled, his scales turning a satisfied shade of blue. The galaxy was changing, and humanity, the species they had once mocked for its tiny fleet, was leading the way. In Earth orbit, the human fleet continued its patrols. Their ships might have looked small against the backdrop of space, but nobody would ever underestimate them again. Size, as humanity had proven, wasn't everything. Sometimes the smallest ships carried the biggest surprises.